Today we're talking about how to be debt-free with mortgage strategy. I'm going to go over three specific ways to do it because often with mortgage strategy, we think about how to gain long-term wealth, but I think it's important that we also realize that you don't have to do the investing side of things. You can use mortgage strategy to reduce your debt down to zero much quicker, shave years off your mortgage. And I'm going to show three separate ways to do that. So to start, I'm going to share my screen. Uh, Okay. So debt free with mortgage strategy. Let's go forward. Obviously, who am I? You guys probably know me, but I'll just put it out here anyways. So I'm Jeff Hamilton. I am a Smith Manoeuvre certified professional and a licensed mortgage broker with Mortgage Pal. These days, I focus exclusively on mortgage strategy because I think it's so powerful. It's changed my life, and I think it can change many other lives. So that's why I spend all my time doing this. So the first way that you can become debt free much quicker with a mortgage strategy, it's actually the same way you would build wealth, but with a different focus. Every time we build a mortgage strategy with Smith Maneuver for a client, we always provide them with a theoretical mortgage freedom date. This is really important because this shows them the date by which their investments are going to be worth more than their remaining debt. So theoretically, you could sell your investments and gain your and reduce all your debt to zero. But I want to show a different thing because I'm going to go over an exact scenario where we can, where to show you exactly when you can actually sell it and take into consideration the capital gains tax and everything else that you might need to consider. I think I'm sharing the correct screen now. Yes. Okay, so I'm going to go over the setup. I'm going to use the same setup for all three, more or less, so that we can compare how they work. Okay, so this setup is for anyone that has a mortgage. In this scenario, I'm using a 65% loan to value. So the amount of your mortgage is a maximum 65% of the value of your home. And I'm going to go over some of the assumptions I've made here. So I'm using a 40% tax rate for the individual or family in the scenario, an average of 8% investment return. And I'm always going to suggest we use this, which is any tax savings or refunds that we get, we use to prepay the mortgage and invest. So 100% towards that. Now for the mortgage, I've assumed a property value of $1 million, a mortgage balance of $650,000 just to make math really easy. That's a 65% loan to value, so 35% equity. I put the mortgage rate at 4, so nothing crazy aggressive either way. It's pretty normal for these days. And with a 25-year amortization, that brings our monthly payment to 34.19. The line of credit rate I have set at 4.95, which is extremely standard right now. That's prime plus 0.5, so nothing sort extraordinary there. Now for the accelerators, I'm only doing the basic. This is what I actually teach in my free course, how to set this specific scenario up, called a plain Jane. This is only using your mortgage payment to reduce your principal, borrowing that same amount from your HELOC and investing it, and then using the tax refunds that you get as well. So very, very simple. I'm not doing any fancy accelerators in this whatsoever. So let's take a quick look at the results. So normally with a client that wants to focus on wealth gain, I'm going to focus on this number here. This particular client would build a net portfolio value of $1.32 million. That's amazing, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. What we're here to talk about today is when you could become debt free. So the theoretical mortgage freedom date is right here on year 18. That's when your investments are worth, it's hard to say, about $650,000 and your debt's worth $650,000. So if you wanted to be debt free at that point, you could sell it, but this doesn't take into account capital gains taxes, which is really important. So I've gone ahead and figured out where we would actually be debt free. At year 19, we're not quite there. We still have capital gains tax that's going to push us over the limit. At year 20 is when we'd be debt free. So I'm going to show you how that works by switching screens one more time. Going back to here. So here it is. Year 20, your investment value, portfolio value will be 801,896. If you sell all of that at once on the capital gains portion at a 40% tax rate, you're going to be taxed $101,864. The debt remaining that you also have to cover is $650,000. So if you take 801 minus 101 minus 650, you're going to have a remainder of $50,000. So by year 20, you could sell all your investments, pay the capital gains tax, pay off your debt, be debt free, and walk away with another $50,000. So that's pretty powerful. That's shaving a full 5 years off the original amortization date of 25 years. Pretty amazing. Let's Now go over scenario two, which is rental cash jamming. Okay, this is for people that have a rental property. Obviously, most people think of rental cash jamming as a different accelerator within Smith Manoeuvre, which it absolutely can be, but it doesn't have to be. In fact, if you don't layer in all the other strategies, rental cash jamming on its own is meant to reduce the amortization of your loan. Use the rental income to reduce your non-deductible debt, replace it with deductible debt, and then crush it right down to zero. So let's see how that works. So this is my rental cash jamming example. I've set it up exactly the same, but I'm going to go and walk you through it anyway. So same marginal tax rate, 40%, same investment return, 8%. That one actually won't play in to the scenario because we're not trying to invest. We're trying to reduce our debt. And any tax savings are also included in the pay down. Okay, so let's go to mortgage information. The subject property, which is your owner occupied house, is set up exactly the same. $1 million property value, $650,000 mortgage balance, a 4% rate, 25-year amortization, same monthly payment of $34.19. Line of credit rate is going to be 4.95. Global limit is 650 just to keep everything clean. And then here's our rental property. I assumed a semi-conservative rental property. So value of 600,000 and a mortgage balance of 450. I put the rate at 4.14, which puts our payment at $2,400. The important thing here, I put in some expenses and I put in some monthly rent. The important thing here is the cash flow. I put this specifically so that it's cash flow neutral. You're not making or losing any money. I wanted to make sure that isn't the reason that we're pushing our mortgage down. So cash flow is exactly zero. The rent just covers the expenses. Now, if you're not as familiar with cash damming, rental cash damming, the way this works is you're going to collect the $3,250 in rent. You're going to make a prepayment onto your mortgage. You're then going to reborrow that money from your HELOC because of your readvanceable mortgage. And then you're going to pay all your rental expenses using that newly borrowed $3,250. The reason this works is because you're swapping your bad mortgage debt for your good investment loan debt. And now it's tax deductible. And so let's see the impact that has. Actually, we'll go over the strategy. So I didn't do anything fancy here. I'm only doing rental cash jamming. So I'm not layering on multiple strategies, just rental cash jamming. And let's see the effect it has. So this green line you can see is the regular mortgage, what you would have been. You get to be debt free by year 25. In the rental cash jamming scenario, you can see the bad debt, the mortgage debt, is the blue line that goes down to zero by 9 years and is replaced by deductible debt at the same kind of inverse relationship there. The orange line is your total debt, and you can see that goes down to zero just after 19 years, 19 and a half years. So what it's doing is it's using that rental income to swap your debt as quickly as possible. And then once it's swapped in year 9, it's using all that debt to quickly pay down your remaining debt down to zero by 19 and a bit years. So let's look at that. So rental cash jamming, 25 years and 5 months is actually the exact date that it goes down. So not 19 is 25, 20.5. The result is that you're going to be debt free, and that's it. It's pretty simple. You get debt free. And actually, I'm just going to quickly check, is it 20 and a half or 19 and a half? It's 19 years, 5 months. So that's actually incorrect. Let me just change that. 19 years, 5 months. There you go. So just under 20 years, you're going to be debt free and have your rental property still cash flow neutral, assuming nothing changes, and you can continue on with that with no mortgage on your primary property. So that's a great strategy. And the last one I want to talk about is Power of the Paycheck. This is a different strategy. This is not Smith Manoeuvre. Power of the Paycheck relies on a specific mortgage product that has a simple daily interest. So basically, how it works is it's a mortgage and a HELOC and a checking account all combined into one account. And anytime you input money, so anytime you get income from your job, it's going to reduce your amount of debt. Anytime you add expenses for living your life, like going to a restaurant or buying groceries, it's going to add to your debt. This is an ideal situation for people that are high income earners and have low expenses. So there's a big delta between how much they make and how much they expend. When you're in that scenario, this can shave a tremendous amount of time off your mortgage. This does not include anything special about investing or anything like that. This is just a strategy that can be set up so that you're reducing your income as quickly as possible by taking advantage of the mechanisms of daily simple interest. So this is Power of the Paycheck. So this one's set up a little bit differently just because the mechanisms that are making it work are a little bit different. You can see I've selected Manulife here. Manulife One is the main product that does this in Canada. So we have to choose that. I'm doing the same marginal income interest, which doesn't really come into effect here. Same investment return. Well, doesn't actually come into effect at all, anyways. And same prepayment. Again, it doesn't come into effect. This is not leveraged investing. This is just taking advantage of a mortgage product in a strategic way to pay down your mortgage. The mortgage setup is almost exactly the same. So we have a $1 million property value, a $650,000 mortgage balance. I put the rate at 4.7 because with Manulife One, the rate is going to be quite a bit higher. You're not going to get the most competitive rate on the market because of the way the mortgage is structured. If this is the right product for you, that rate isn't going to matter nearly as much because the structure of the mortgage is what's going to allow you to shave years and years off your mortgage, and you'll pay less interest in the long run by a long shot. I've kept the amortization the same, the HELOC rate at 4.95. So all pretty similar. And then we'll go to the accelerators. So you can see the only accelerator I'm taking advantage of here is the power of the Paycheque accelerator. That is the taking advantage of that pay down and build up income disparity in the main HELOC account. Okay. There's other specifics too. I can show you actually here. So for this example, I'm assuming that the income of the two people that are owning this house is $7,500 a month cash to themselves. I'm assuming that they have, I put in some living expenses. This is how you do this to calculate how much they're going to use on average. And I put that at $4,000 a month. These are dual income, no kid type people. I've also included a top up balance of 10,000 and a minimum line of credit balance of 3,000. This is a bit of a nitty gritty for the strategy, but it's how you continually allow there to be room to pay down in your HELOC without having to pay the highest interest rate on the entire thing. So you don't need to understand how this works necessarily, but it's just this is how we maximize the effectiveness of the strategy for most people here. And let's look at the results from this. This is not making anything different, just using the mortgage product to your advantage here. So the green line is a traditional mortgage. If you paid your mortgage just normal monthly, like you would in a normal bank, at 25 years, you're zero balance. The blue line is your HELOC balance. Now you can see it starts a little bit high. That's giving us some room to pay down the HELOC. The rest is the locked in portion. But the orange line is what you really want to pay attention to. The orange line is your total debt, and you can see it's down to zero by 19.9 years. So just by taking advantage of the simple daily interest versus the semi-annual interest that most mortgages come with, and using that income disparity where you bring in more than your expenses, you can crush your debt down to zero without doing anything different, just by the right setup and the right settings on your Manulife One mortgage. So let's take a look at how that plays out on my spreadsheet here, on my thing here. So by year 20, it's actually 19.9, but year 20, we use the income of $7,500 a month. We use expenses of $4,000 a month, and it results in after 20 years, you're completely debt free. So that is three ways for a variety of different setups that could apply to you to be debt free 5 years earlier that very few people are talking about. And I think a lot more people should know about these kinds of strategies because why would you want to spend an extra 5 years paying your mortgage if you don't have to? These strategies don't cost you anything extra out of the month out of your pocket, assuming you have the rental property, assuming you're at the right HELOC, assuming that you have this income disparity. But other than your setup, if you fall into one of these setups, you can easily implement this without changing anything else that you're doing and shave 5 extra years off your mortgage. Can you combine different scenarios? You have, yes, you can. The only tricky part with combining some of these scenarios is the power of the Paycheque. So the power of the Paycheque is actually a great fit, and the product that you use for it is a great fit for Smith Maneuver, but they're working towards different goals when you want to try and pay off quicker. So if you, for example, wanted to do the plain Jane income producing one and power of the Paycheque, they can absolutely work together, but they're trying to accomplish different things. So it's not like you get double benefit. You get partial benefit of each that can combine to probably a bigger benefit overall. But yes, you can combine different scenarios. And that's the same as with all the accelerators in Smith Maneuver. There's 8 different boxes we can choose from for accelerators, and they can be combined in different ways. You could have a rental property and do prime the pump and do plain Jane all at once, or you could do sole proprietor, rental cash dam, sole proprietor cash dam, and cash flow diversion. Everything can be done together, and everything can be done in different ways to maximize what you need to accomplish whatever goal you're going after. Can you go over some of the risks with Smith Maneuver? Yeah. The risks with Smith Maneuver is that we've been taught our whole lives to get rid of debt, get rid of debt, get rid of debt. Smith Maneuver looks at debt like an opportunity, which I think is more accurate. And that's more specifically borrowing room. If you use the debt that you have currently today and you use it more effectively, the expected outcome is tremendous because the interest rate on your HELOC that you're borrowing from is going to be somewhere in the line of 4.95 or somewhere in that range right now. It sometimes can go higher, sometimes can go lower, but because it's tax free, beating that ratio or that number with your investment is actually really a pretty simple job. If you look at something like the S&P 500, that's a 10.5% return for the past however many years. So to get that return on the Smith maneuver setup is going to be tremendously helpful. I never even assume that we're going to get that high. I always go 7 or 8% just to be conservative. The biggest risk is that you're holding your debt for the long term and you have to be consistent with it. Other than that, there's volatility risk, but because Smith Manoeuvre is such a long-term strategy, it's mostly negated by the length of time. I would never recommend doing Smith Manoeuvre for 5 years, even 10 years. 10 years is kind of like the lowest I would ever recommend. I really prefer 15, 20, 25, 30, because at those timelines, you can make a huge difference and negate a lot of the risks that come along with it. Next question. If any additional funds are needed earlier, say for a new car, would this affect the payout date? Yes, of course. So if you're going to borrow more money for personal reasons, there's two things to consider with that. Obviously, yes, if you borrow more money for, say, a new car in this example, it's going to push out the date by which you're able to be debt free. But the second thing to consider with Smith Maneuver is that if you're going to need a payout of some sort for a new car, say you wanted access to $20,000 to buy a used car at some point in cash. It's important to know that when you're setting up your Smith maneuver so that you can segregate an amount of your HELOC specifically for personal reasons. You don't want to mix any investment HELOC with any personal stuff. So if you have an investment HELOC of, say, $100,000, but you have room in it to borrow more, you never want to take it to borrow a car. You can't do that because then the funds are commingled. That makes an accounting nightmare and really puts your tax deductibility at risk. That's why tracking is so important in Smith Maneuver. If you wanted to do that, you would just take a $20,000 chunk of your HELOC, separate it out so that they're completely separate. They can track the interest differently. Buy your car with that $20,000 HELOC and then pay it back over time. But that does change the math on all these assumptions because we're borrowing more money. So if you can't keep doing what you're doing exactly, the assumptions change. Are there restrictions on how I use the borrowed money from HELOC? For example, contributing to a TFSA? Yes, there are. Great question. So TFSA and RSP or RESP are all tax sheltered accounts. Those would be ineligible for Smith Maneuver investments, and that's because you're already getting a massive tax benefit. So I actually did a video not long ago where I compared Smith Maneuver versus TFSA versus RSP. It's interesting to look at kind of the same scenario in three different ways, and they're all the short answer is they're all really great. So if you want to invest in TFSA with extra cash, that's great. You can do that, and you can do Smith Maneuver at the same time, but you can't do Smith Maneuver into your TFSA. So any money you borrow from your HELOC to invest, you're going to want to put into a clean, non-registered account for tracking purposes. You can't put it in TFSA or RSP. However, if you're already contributing, say, $500 a month to your TFSA or $100 a month to your TFSA, you can keep doing that, add on Smith Maneuver on top of that, and it still won't change your monthly cash flow at all. You can still keep doing that 100 and do Smith Maneuver and have your cash flow remain exactly the same. What about using equity to buy a rental house, say 10 years down the road? How would this impact things? That's a fantastic question and something that's getting more advanced into Smith Maneuver, but that's a really great strategy. So you can absolutely use your equity to buy or have a down payment for a rental property. A rental property is considered an investment just like any other investments that you would make that are applicable to Smith Maneuver. So if you wanted to take, say, $100,000 and you had that room in your HELOC, you wanted to take $100,000 out to put a down payment on a rental property and then rent it and then do rental cash damming on your primary residence, you could absolutely do that. And that's a really great way to accelerate things. Is it possible to take a closer look at my personal scenario somehow? Yes, absolutely. So I offer a free strategy session with every member of my group. So if you go to the main page, right under my picture at the top right, there's a little link. If you click that, you can book a strategy session and we'll go through your exact numbers with every strategy and figure out your goals and figure out what's possible for you and I'll give you your long term projections that way. All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.